2023 has been a pretty abysmal year for Hollywood. While there have been a few hits, most blockbusters this year have either underperformed or just flopped. And I think part of the problem is just how many blockbusters are being released nowadays. Before, blockbusters used to be events, having only a few being released in the summertime. But now it seems like big budget movies are kind of the norm, with them coming one after the other. And for audiences, going to theaters has become quite expensive, with movie ticket prices ranging from $10 to $15, and that's just for the tickets. Most people aren't able to afford going to the theater every week, but that's kind of what the movie industry has been expecting given how many are released. They're basically flooding the market with these films. They all have really high budgets, so most of them need to break close to $1 billion or $1 billion itself to actually be successful. The budget to make the film itself is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the expenses with movie making. You also have to factor in the marketing budget, along with movie theaters taking a cut of the profits. All this makes it challenging just to break even, let alone profit. A lot of these movies would probably do fine if they had a more reasonable budget, but I guess studios rationalize it by thinking big budget means big reward. Except that's been blowing up in their faces recently. To try to combat risk, studios will often use recognizable IPs, ones that have already proven themselves, believing they can guarantee support from the already existing audience, which leads to a bunch of reboots, remakes, and sequels. But if this summer is anything to go by, it doesn't look like things worked out the way they had hoped, to say the least. While Disney found success with their live-action remakes back when they first started coming out, with many of them reaching $1 billion in box office revenue, that hasn't really been the case for a while now. Now with Snow White's remake, people are largely rejecting it. For a while now, Disney has seemed kind of ashamed of their original movies, since they believe that many of them haven't aged well, particularly when it comes to female representation, like the princesses. Emma Watson talked about this a bit when she was playing Belle in the 2017 remake of Beauty and the Beast.
You know, I knew I wanted to create a character that, women would relate to that wasn't a throwback Disney heroine. It wasn't a victim heroine, a fainting, a little fainting heroine. So
I wanted to be I think for me, the biggest thing about watching Belle for the first time compared to other Disney heroines was that she wasn't waiting to be saved. There was no saving to be done, She had no interest in marrying the guy who wanted to save her. No interest.
No, he's the worst.
Despite Beauty and the Beast making over $1 billion at the time, this attitude seems to have fallen out of favor with audiences, after Disney received a lot of backlash after interviews with Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, who will be starring in Disney's Snow White remake, made comments disparaging the original, like saying that the prince was a stalker, or how antiquated the 1937 classic is.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was Disney's first animated feature, and its success is what largely made the company what it is today, and it's been entertaining people for generations up until this point, so maybe dunking on it wasn't the best move. It's not just the actors either, but they're also changing the story to be completely different from the original, like replacing the dwarves with magical creatures, and allegedly changing a lot of the plot, like removing the prince entirely and replacing him with a character called Jonathan. And if these interviews are anything to go by, it doesn't actually seem like he's going to be the love interest, or even that important to the story.
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because we cast a guy in the movie. Right. Andrew Burnap, great dude. Yeah. One of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby. But it's...
The thing is, if they're going to change it this much, maybe they should just make a new story. They can still see success without actually using the original's title. For example, Disney's smash hit Frozen was loosely inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. However, Frozen is practically unrecognizable to the Snow Queen, with the only real commonality being a woman with ice powers. Frozen and its sequel both made over $1 billion, which I think proves that Disney doesn't have to rely on remakes or even adaptations of fairy tales to be successful. Or if they do want to adapt fairy tales but not stick so close to the original, they can just do a fairy tale with a twist. Like going back to Snow White, there was Mirror Mirror and Snow White and the Huntsman, which were both adaptations of Snow White, but they were able to do their own thing, while also not dunking on the original 1937 version. It just seems like Hollywood wants to have their cake and eat it too. They want to make money off of older recognizable IPs, but also want to fix them or update them for modern audiences.
All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
So now they're trying to fix things that weren't actually broken. They're kind of acting like romance is negative, when romance has a lot of appeal to audiences, including women, which seems to be the demographic they're targeting the most. But it feels like they're more interested in rewriting these characters to fit their definition of a strong female character, rather than really taking the time to understand these characters to begin with. Snow White was kind and caring, but she was also assertive, and they don't really acknowledge that. And instead of building on the qualities that were present, they just insist the whole thing was bad to begin with, and they had to tear it all down. And it does seem like it's catching up to Disney. Hollywood did have some hits this season, with both Mario and Barbie grossing over $1 billion. Both films highlighted how bright and colorful they were in the marketing, and both are based off of mega brands that are recognized by multiple generations all over the world. While there's no confirmation of a sequel for Mario just yet, there are rumors that it's happening. Mattel, on the other hand, didn't waste any time announcing their films. Allegedly, they have 45 in development, planning on making an entire cinematic universe. I do wonder if they're getting ahead of themselves a little though, which was a major issue for other studios that tried to replicate the success of Marvel, and they ultimately failed. And I also question some of their choices. Does the Magic 8 Ball really need a movie? Barbie was successful because she's one of the most recognizable characters in the world. Everyone loved the sets and costumes, and most people assumed it was a family-friendly movie. Aside from one joke in the second trailer, the marketing didn't really focus on the fact that it was PG-13 or the overt messaging. It looks like Snow White will have similar themes to Barbie, and they both had the same writer, Greta Gerwig, so we'll have to see if she's able to recapture that success for Disney. So far, I'm not hopeful personally, but that's just my opinion. But back to Mattel, they are now reportedly going to make these other movies more adult, like for example, Barney. I didn't even know Mattel owned Barney, but okay. The vice president of Mattel Films claims that it will not be intended for children and will instead lean into millennial angst, which seems to have been a recipe for success for Barbie, but I do question how well that tactic will work for something like Barney. I don't think Barney has the same appeal that Barbie does. I think the movie being surrealist is fine because from what I remember, Barney always had a dreamlike feel to it, although I haven't actually watched Barney since I was like 4. I do wonder if the Mattel Cinematic Universe will end up mirroring the Hasbro Cinematic Universe at all. For example, the live-action Transformers movies started off pretty strong at the box office. Like Barbie, both are based off of popular toy franchises, and both were rated PG-13 with adult content. You all know how I feel about them taking child-friendly properties and making them PG-13. They also both involve drawing audiences in with the spectacle of it all, but lately Transformers movies have been struggling at the box office, including this year's release of Transformers Rise of the Beasts, and currently has the lowest gross performance for a Transformers film. I think if Mattel is committed to making these movies, they should look at what other cinematic universes did, so they can learn what works and what doesn't work, and what they need to focus on to improve. I also think there's a lot that Hollywood in general can learn from this summer. This was pretty brutal. We'll have to see how they choose to move forward, but I'm not entirely optimistic. But that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you think Hollywood can course correct? Or do you think they're in too deep? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Stutenia, Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, The Rabbit Mancer, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Hussyman42, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Garcia XV Legend, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Sky, Felix Bam, Soundboy00, Owen Wildish, Player Zero, Kitsune Fiora, Lucas Geist, Datadyne Executive, Jay Draws, Blue Spirit, Bandito Bane, Lil, Meowsers, Sky, Jin KZ, Philip, and Ninja Rex. Thank you all so much for your support. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this video and like our content, you can leave a like on the video and subscribe, and that part's free. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.